No, we're on there. We're on the regular.
Can you get the later?
I know.
No, I'll get it.
It's streaming.
Okay, and so should there be throngs watching us on YouTube, we are out there.
Whoever watches. Just look on. What the heck is that?
I don't know.
What did I do now?
You're fine.
Oh. You were screen sharing. I'm screen sharing. Okay, now it's good.
It is fun. Good morning. Good evening.
Now it's good. Okay.
Okay, and here comes Kevin. So, Linda, I'm going to mute everybody up, and then I will ask you to unmute yourself, and we'll be ready to begin.
Okie doke.
And great, and Linda, I think you're unmuted, so.
Okay, well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And tonight we are very lucky. We welcome Kevin Jennings to our Shabbat service, and we looked forward to his inspiring words later this evening. And I don't know about you, but so much of my life has come to a screeching halt. The world is so very different. But if you've had the chance to look outside, it is very clear that this amazing world continues to be wonderful. The roses continue to bloom, the birds continue to nest, the beans continue to produce. And in this time when all life is rejuvenating and bursting forth, it is really a very good time to look within ourselves and challenge ourselves to becoming our very best selves. So let us welcome this opportunity to be together. And I love looking at all your beautiful faces, and I miss you all so much. But tonight we can reflect and pray, and we can sing and be inspired. And let us all welcome Shabbat with the singing of Hine Ma Tov, which you, if you have your prayer book, it's on page 128, but there it is. Hine Ma Tovu Manahi, Shevet Hachim Gam Yachad. Hine Ma Tovu Manahi, Shevet Hachim Gam Yachad. Hine Ma Tov, Hine Ma Tov, La 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 La. Hine Ma Tov, Hine Ma Tov, La 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 La. Hine Ma Tovu Manahi, Shevet Hachim Gam Yachad. Hine Ma Tovu Manahi, Shevet Hachim Gam Yachad. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Linda, and we thank everyone for joining us to welcome Shabbat. Our reform movement has long been on the vanguard of the fight for LGBTQ equality. Our congregation, in our 1997 bylaws, before and beyond, has embraced and championed inclusion. This is in keeping with an understanding articulated by a colleague, Rabbi Adam Rosenwasser, who has written how the Torah teaches, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. He comments, there are no ifs, ands, or buts. We are commanded to love all members of this fabulous human family. In the creation account of the book of Genesis, God creates us b'tselem Elohim, in God's image. That means that all of us, no matter our race, religion, gender identity, nationality, economic status, disability, or sexual orientation, are reflections of the divine being who created us all. Therefore, when we act with love and compassion towards one another, we become holy. But holiness is not enough. Being holy means we become aware of our task to fix this broken world. The biblical prophets urge us on with their words, justice, justice shall you pursue. Pursuing justice means that we will keep working until our objectives are achieved, until we gain full civil rights for all, including marriage equality and non-discrimination protections across our country. Well, assuredly, since he's written, progress has been made. Assuredly, there's a lot more to do. That's why now, especially now, we must redouble our efforts to ritualize and to remind ourselves of the ongoing struggle. Hence, tonight is Pride Shabbat. Later in our service, we will hear from our friend Kevin Jennings, a national leader. Soloists Rebecca Rosen and Lisa Siegel join Linda Goodman, our director of sacred music, for tonight's music. Catherine Albee screen shares our text. Now, as we formally welcome Shabbat and its own distinct invitation to holiness and affirmation of justice, Babs and Bobby lead us in candle lighting. It'll be found on page 120. And Babs and Bobby, we invite you to unmute.
Yes.
I think you have. Great.
Yes.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us, as their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light. So may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehavner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech haolam,
asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehavner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. We turn to page 138 in our prayer books for L'Chadodi. We'll be singing, in addition to L'Chadodi, the first, the second, and the 9th verses of L'Chadodi.
L'Chadodi lekrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mikabela. 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 Shamoy v'zachor b'dibur echad, Ishmianu el ham yechad, Adonai echad shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet v'litina. L'Chadodi lekrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mikabela. L'Chadodi pnei Shabbat nikavila. Lekrat Shabbat lekuvenelcha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof maseh, b'mat Shabbat tehila, lechat dodi lekrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikavila. Lechat dodi lekrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikavila. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam b'simcha u'tzola, toch emunah sigula, boi chala, boi chala, boi chala. Lechat dodi lekrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikavila. Lechat dodi lekrat kala, pnei Shabbat nikavila.
We now turn in our prayer books and our Siddurim to page 144 for the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadav yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach hute v'amlich malchute, b'chayechon ufyomechon, ufchayedecho beit Yisrael, bagala uvizman kariv, v'himeru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach, le'alam u'lemei Maya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yiromam, V'yitnasei, V'yithadar, V'yitalei, V'yithalal, Shemei Dekudesha Brihu, Leila Mincho Berchata, V'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma, v'meru. Amen.
Page 146. For those who are able, we invite you to rise for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
We turn to page 149 for the second reading on the page. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it, we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over?
Baruch atah Adonai Hamarif Haravim.
Page 151, the second reading down on the page. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol, all these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form?
Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Page 152.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto le'olam va'ed.
Please be seated. On page 154, we join together with Linda in the chanting of the Ve'ahavta.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol vavacha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol meotecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anohi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha Vishinantam levanecha, vidibartam bam, bishivtecha, vivetecha, uvlektecha, baderech, ushokbecha, uvkumecha, ukshartam leho, taliodecha, vihayuletotapot, beinenecha, Tavtam, amisusot betecha, uvisharecha, luman tiskeru, bahasitem, eko mitzvotai, vihitem kiroshim lelohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem.
Emet. On page 157, I read out loud our second reading on the page. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea. Mi Kamocha will be found, page 158.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la. Mi kamocha ba'im Adonai, mi kamocha nehtar b'kodesh, nora tehilot hosefele, nora tehilot hosefele. Malachutecha v'menecha tekeya, lekei Moshe u'Miriam, Seli anu ve'anenu, Seli anu ve'anenu. Adonai lo le'olam va'ed, Adonai lo le'olam va'ed.
Page 161. Give us a place to rest, Adonai, our God. Bring us into shelter, into the long, soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us the shelter of your peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. We turn now to page 162 for our prayer for Shabbat, for Vishamru. Rebecca, you are unmuted.
V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein bnei Yisrael, oti leolam. V'shamru bnei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ishnish Adonai asaro hashamayim et haaretz v'shamru bnei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru bnei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru bnei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam.
Our service now continues, page 164. For those who are able, we rise for the tefillah. We'll be chanting the prayers on the right-hand pages, on the even-numbered pages, beginning on page 164, continuing to page 170, as Rebecca leads us as we begin the tefillah.
Adonai sifai tifta ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotinu v'Imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Chanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovin, V'konei Hakol, V'zoher Hasteavot Ve'imaot, Umevi Gula V'bnei B'neichem, Leman Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham, V'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayi HaKol Atarav Le'Oshia, Mechakel Chayim Behesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachavim Rabim, Someh Noflim U'Refe Holim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekaye U'Mato Lishenei Afar, Michamo Habal Gevurot, U'Mido Melach, Melech Mimi U'Mechaye, U'Matzmi HaYeshua, V'neman Hata Lechayot HaKol, Baruch Baruch atah Adonai mechayei ha'akol.
You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
Amen. Please be seated. In the 16th century, Rabbi Isaac Luria taught that at the time of creation, vessels containing primordial divine light shattered, causing sparks to be scattered throughout the cosmos. Sparks of that light extend even to the darkest corners of creation. Through our acts of goodness, we gather and uplift the sparks. Through our peace and peace of mind, working for peace of mind for all, and through our promotion of justice and our rejection of bigotry, we help to repair this fractured world. Thus, even during times of darkness, especially during times of darkness, every righteous act counts. Avowing the pathway to peace and blessing through those sparks of redemption, we sing Shalom Rav for abundant peace, page 178.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Echad Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Echad Tasim Leolam. Ki Atahu Melech Adon Lekol HaShalom. Ki Atahu Melech Adon Lekol HaShalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Echad Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Echad Tasim Leolam. Betov Benecha Levarech Et Amecha Yisrael Bechol Hetu Bechol Shah Bishlomecha. Shalom Rav Yisrael Echad Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Echad Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
We now pause for silent prayer.
Yiul ratzon imrei fi Giul ratzon imrefi. Vehegel dibil lefanecha. Adonai suvim v'govali. Only the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart, be acceptable before you. Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, say shalom dimroma. Huya say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'inu. Amen.
Each Shabbat, we pray on behalf of dear ones within and beyond our congregational family who are ill and in need of healing. Tonight, we likewise include Devorah Malka Bat Esther Rivka, Penina Bat Esther, Jan Gregory, Marvin Worth, Janet Dias and her husband Jim, Wendy Hoser. I invite you to unmute and say out loud the names of those for whom we pray this Shabbat.
Michael Dorf,
Sandy Lane.
Ruth Schifrin.
Fran Davids,
Donald Jensen.
Diana Mead.
Mishebeirach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishebeirach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Rabbi, you gotta meet this guy. A mutual friend told me. That was just over 3 years ago. And a few days later, at his part-time residence in Southbury, we were sipping mugs of coffee that Kevin had prepared, akin to Jewish geography, whereby Jews discover connections within a shared universe. We engaged in a type of anti-hate geography and avowed several shared links along with a common mission. I've learned Kevin Jennings draws on a lifetime of special achievement. The first member of his family to earn a college degree from Harvard, While teaching in Concord, Massachusetts, he went on to help students create the nation's first Gay Straight Alliance Club and then found GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. He was part of the committee which created LGBTQ History Month, now observed every October, and is the writer of 7 books and the producer of films. Along the way, he picked up graduate degrees at Columbia and NYU. In 2009, Kevin became the Assistant Secretary of Education, leading the campaign against bullying and earning the nickname the Anti-Bullying Czar. He's run the Arcus Foundation and the Tenement Museum. On Tuesday, one of his projects, the documentary Welcome to Chechnya, about the ongoing pogrom and persecution of LGBTQ people, will air on HBO, June 30th at 10 p.m. Eastern. Since December 2019, Kevin is CEO of Lambda Legal, a premier legal advocacy group. Kevin's also been a trustee of Union Seminary in New York, which has its own close historic ties to Judaism and our people. I've been grateful for the introduction to Kevin. It's always a pleasure to speak with him. As such, B'nai Israel, let me tell you, you have to hear this guy. Kevin?
You actually hate introductions like that because then everybody afterwards is like, oh, it wasn't that good. Thank you, Rabbi Eric. Let me say a couple of things. First of all, let me thank Linda and Rebecca and Lisa for your gift of song. You have an embarrassment of riches for a relatively small congregation in these 3 women. And let me compliment Barbara on having the best backdrop of anybody so far on Zoom. When Rabbi Eric asked me about a year ago if I'd be willing to speak tonight, I immediately said yes. I've actually been a full-time resident of Southbury since March 13th when the pandemic hit, and I'm deeply involved in our local community. And I know that Rabbi Eric is an incredible force for good, not just in Southbury, not just in Northwestern Connecticut, but throughout our land. So, Eric, thank you. I feel truly honored to have been asked to speak tonight and to be with you as Jews have done for 5,780 years, gathering this Friday night. I wanted to, as Eric mentioned, I began my career 35 years ago, not that anyone's counting, as a high school history teacher. And you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take the classroom out of the teacher. So when I thought about what I wanted to say tonight, I thought I wanted to do a little history lesson. Because if you're not familiar with LGBTQ history or culture, you might not know, and I'm not the youngest child at the Seder, but you might not know why this night is different than all other nights. The next 3 days are the LGBTQ equivalent of the High Holy Days. And in my little history lesson I'm going to give you tonight, I want you to understand why. But as I was listening to the prayers and the service while we were gathering, I really thought there was a particular reading that touched me. The reading about what we do in the hour of change. Shall we draw back or shall we cross over? My life has been profoundly different because of LGBTQ leaders and their allies, many of them Jewish, who in that hour of change have not drawn back, but instead have crossed over. Let's see if I can share my screen. If all goes well, we should soon be at the beginning of my little slideshow, which I've nicknamed Queeros, the people who made LGBTQ history. To understand how the world has changed since I was born in 1963, you must take yourself back to a time which for young people is almost unimaginable. In the 1950s, we all know about the McCarthy era and the Red Scare, when there were witch hunts for communists throughout our nation. Less well known is the Lavender Scare. In 1953, President Dwight Eisenhower signed Executive Order 104500, which prohibited the employment of known perverts by the federal government. And it became the official policy of the US government not to employ LGBTQ people, nor could anyone who contracted with the US government. When I was born 10 years later in 1963, same-sex relationships were still a crime in 49 states, as they had been since the arrival of Europeans in the 1600s. Being LGBT was considered a mental illness for which one could be institutionalized against your will and possibly lobotomized or castrated. So I grew up in a very, very different time than the one in which we live today. A time in which being LGBT was a mental illness, being LGBT was a crime, and being LGBT disqualified you from holding a decent job in America. Why did that change? And why are the next 3 nights different than all other nights for LGBTQ people? To understand that, you have to understand the climate of the 1960s, when it was routine for the police to harass LGBTQ people, for them to enter LGBTQ bars and other establishments, and to harass the patrons, to arrest them, or to extort them for fear that their identities would be revealed if they did not pay. All of that began to change on a fateful night, June 28th, 1969. This didn't seem like a big deal to the authorities at the time. This is the article about that event, which appeared on page B26 of the New York Times Metro section, a mere 5 paragraphs. But that night would change the lives of LGBTQ people forever. What happened that night at a bar called the Stonewall Inn in New York City was that the police entered the bar and began to harass the patrons, as was routine in that time. That night, however, was different than all other nights because the patrons chose to fight back. And they liberated the bar and they drove the police out. And for 3 days, there was violence and unrest on the streets of Greenwich Village, an event we now call today the Stonewall Riots. Critical in leading the fight were trans women of color, like the woman on the left, Sylvia Rivera, and the woman on the right, Marsha P. Johnson. People who were among the most disenfranchised and despised at the time, but who nevertheless had the courage to stand and to fight back. This was unprecedented in LGBTQ history and inspirational to LGBTQ people across America. And I think particularly poignant and ironic in this time in which our nation is once again unsettled by protests over police misconduct, police violence, and police harassment. It is important to remember that the LGBTQ modern movement began as a riot against police misconduct, and police harassment. The next year, on the anniversary of the Stonewall Riot, June 28th, 1970, New York City held its first Pride Parade. And this year, in 2020, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Pride. And because LGBTQ people began to stand and fight back and demand to be treated with human dignity, the world began to change. Lambda Legal, the organization I now run, was instrumental in that change. It was founded in 1973 with the express direction that it used the courts to advocate for LGBTQ equality. If you remember, in 1973, being LGBTQ was still a crime in most of America. And believe it or not, as we entered the 21st century, in 14 states, it remained one, until these 2 men called Lambda Legal. The man on the left, John Lawrence, the man on the right, Tyrone Garner. They were arrested in the privacy of their own home in Houston, Texas. And they decided that they weren't going to take it anymore. And they approached Lambda Legal and they asked for representation. Lambda took their case. And on June 26, 2003, 17 years ago to this day, the Supreme Court ruled in the landmark Lawrence versus Texas decision that such laws criminalizing LGBTQ people were unconstitutional. And for the first time in American history, since the passage of the first so-called sodomy laws in Massachusetts Bay in 1642, it was no longer a crime to be gay in America. That same year, two women in Boston, Julie and Hillary Goodrich, decided to sue the state of Massachusetts. They made an argument that they were being discriminated against solely based on their sex, that if they wished to marry a man, they would be granted a license, but because they each had chosen as a partner a woman, they were being discriminated against based on their sex. And that lawsuit went to the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts in November of 2003. And that year, Massachusetts became the first state in our country to grant marriage equality to people of the same sex. 10 years later, this woman, Edie Windsor, would sue the United States of America. Edie had lost her partner and wife of many years, Thea Spire, and the United States of America denied her access to Thea's Social Security and other benefits, arguing that their marriage was not valid in the eyes of the United States law. Edie, who was Jewish, did not take that lying down. She decided to fight back, and she sued. Here she is on the steps of the Supreme Court on June 26, 2013, 7 years ago tonight, celebrating her victory and the elimination of the Discriminatory Defense of Marriage Act, which singled out LGBTQ couples for disparate treatment based on the gender of their partners. Two years later, this man, Jim Obergefell, decided to sue as well. He lived in a state where, unlike New York, the state of Ohio, they did not grant same-sex marriage equality. He argued that was unconstitutional. And in a case where he was once again represented by Lambda Legal, on June 26, 2015, 5 years ago tonight, the Supreme Court agreed. And marriage equality became the law of the land in America. So that's why this night is different than any other night for LGBTQ people. There is something about June 26 that's special. It is perhaps the most important date in LGBTQ history, rivaled perhaps only by June 28, 1969, the night of the Stonewall riots. And it is why we have Pride every weekend at this time in the summer every year. Obviously, the world is vastly different than when I was born. In 1973, thanks to the work of the Jewish activist Frank Kameny, the American Psychological Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental illnesses. Being gay was no longer a sickness. Thanks to John Lawrence and Tyrone Garner with the representation of Lambda Legal on June 26, 2003, being gay was no longer a crime. And thanks to the leadership of Edie Windsor on June 26, 2013, and Jim Obergefell on June 26, 2015, same-sex relationships, like the one I have shared with my partner for 25 years, were granted the same level of what Justice Kennedy called equal dignity as relationships between two people of the opposite sex. I am deeply grateful to people like Frank and Edie and Sylvia and Marcia and countless others I could name, who in the hour of change, when faced with the choice, shall we draw back or shall we cross over, chose to cross over. But our work is not done. Not here in the United States, where 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ. The vast majority of them homeless because their families have tossed them out of their homes because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. Not when we look around the globe, when in over 70 countries, the so-called sodomy laws are still on the book, and one can be imprisoned for loving someone of the same sex. In 12 of those countries, you can still be put to death. We have much work still to do. Undoubtedly, you read the papers, or more accurately, you read the internet, and you're aware that June Pride Month became an even little bit more special a week ago Monday, when the Supreme Court ruled that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 extended its protections to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people who could, for the first time in American history, have legal recourse if they were fired from their jobs because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity, as I was from my first teaching job in 1987. For the first time in American history, the history of a country which in 1953 said that not only was it okay to discriminate, it was the law to discriminate. By the way, that executive order 104500, elements of it remained on the books for 42 years until President Clinton finally repealed the last pieces of that executive order in 1995. Today, or more specifically, since a week ago Monday, we have done a 180-degree turn as a society from one in which the government as a policy practiced discrimination to one now where the government as a policy protects LGBTQ people from it. That is thanks to people like the two women in this picture. The woman on the left is Sharon McGowan. She is Lambda Legal's legal director. The woman on the right is Amy Stevens. Amy Stevens was the plaintiff in the lawsuit that was decided a week ago Monday. Amy was a trans woman who worked at a funeral home in Michigan. And in 2013, when she told her boss that she planned to come out as transgender, she was fired from her job. Like so many before her, Frank Kameny, Edie Windsor, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Amy decided to fight back. And she took her case to court. Here are Sharon and Amy on the steps of the Supreme Court on October 8th, 2019, the day Amy's argument was heard before the highest court of our land, the first suit in American history on the dignity and worth of transgender people. And of course, you know the happy ending. A week ago Monday, the court agreed with Amy and established new legal protections for trans and lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. There's a very sad twist in this story. Amy died May 12th. Amy did not live to see justice done. In the legal profession, we say, justice delayed is justice denied. And in fact, in her lifetime, Amy did not live to see justice done. But 6 weeks after she died, her actions brought about justice for LGBTQ people. On the day Amy died, I couldn't help but think of the story of Moses. Moses led the Jews out of captivity and through the wilderness to the promised land. But as you know, Moses died without ever being able to live in the promised land. It was Joshua who led the Jews to the promised land. Amy led LGBTQ people to the edge of the promised land of equality. But on May 12th, she perished and would never live in the land she had helped create. Many of the people I've spoken to you about tonight, Edie Windsor, Amy Stevens, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, have passed, leaving behind through their courage, their tenacity, their persistence, and their leadership a better, more just world than the one into which they and I were born. Amy, by the way, was 3 years older than me. She was born in 1960. Through their courage and their sacrifice, we live in a more just society today, and we owe them a debt. And there is only one way to pay the debt we owe them, and that is through our own words, our own actions, and our own deeds to make sure that the world we leave to the next generation is a more just one than the one we inherited. This talk would have been illegal the year I was born. It changed, not because years passed, but in the words of the great gay artist Andy Warhol, people will tell you that time changes things, but actually you have to change them yourself. People like Edie and Amy took history into their own hands and changed the course of our nation and brought greater justice for us to enjoy today. We owe them a debt that we can only pay by working to make sure that the next generation is freer than we are. Again, in America, we face an hour of change. And we face the same question that Amy and Edie and Marsha and Sylvia faced. Will we draw back or will we cross over? As our nation struggles once again to fulfill its ideals, I ask and beg of you not to draw back, but to cross over in honor of those that came before, that helped create a better world for us to enjoy today, and in hopes that we will indeed ourselves leave a better world for the next generation to come. I thank you sincerely and profoundly for this opportunity to be with you tonight.
Kevin, and thank you. And from one educator to another, to cross over, the Hebrew word for that is ivri. The word for Hebrews is ivrim. One who crosses over is an ivri. Abraham was an ivri, one who crossed over. He crossed over the Jordan. He crossed over to monotheism. And so it is, as Abraham crossed over, as you have shown how people cross over, precisely that is a sacred enterprise to cross over. You know, at the Seder, Dayenu, it would be enough, shows that the process must be step by step. One step is not enough. There always has to be that next step in the process of going to freedom and going to redemption. Kevin, thank you for the steps that you have shared with us this evening. And thank you for the steps that you continue to take. We turn to page 586. We invite those who are able to rise for the Aleinu. The Aleinu that we'll be chanting is the second paragraph on the page as we now begin our concluding prayers.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kugei havratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot hadamo, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gal aleinu kechol hamonam. V'anachnu korim ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Please be seated, page 591 for V'ne'emar.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
We now call to mind our own beloved dead, and I ask that those in mourning or remembering the anniversary of the death of a loved one, should you wish at home, please rise when their name is mentioned. This Shabbat, remember the yahrzeits, the anniversaries of the deaths of Robert Agan, William Barnett II, Gertrude Barr, Regina Blum, Constance A. Crime, Jewel M. Don, Harry Fleischer, Jeanette F. Geller, Harry Goldfarb, Bessie Green, Charles Herman, Tilly Kramer, William Lesser, May Millman, Alex Phillips, David Reps, Julius Spiro. Should you have a dear one's name to add, please unmute your computer and say their names now.
David Hoser and Louis Hoser.
Ira Goldman.
Eric Hall.
Charles Eventoff.
On this Shabbat, we especially remember our LGBTQ siblings who were martyred in years past, those murdered by fanatics in earlier ages and the Middle Ages, those who perished in the Shoah and the Holocaust, those struck down in our own land, in our own time. Likewise, remember those who took their own lives, driven by despair, by a world that hated them because of their love or gender. And we recall those whose lives were characterized by loneliness as they repressed their true natures and refrained from sharing their love. We also remember the dead this week from COVID-19. And each Shabbat, we also mention 6 names amongst the 6 million murdered in the Shoah, the Holocaust. We now remember Label Ackerman, Brina Eicherman, Hannah Eicherman, Zona Oxman, Yevgeny Aksyonov, and Chaya Aksyonova. In remembrance and solidarity, on behalf of those for whom there is no one but us to say Kaddish, we now invite all watching on Zoom or on YouTube to rise if you are able for our Kaddish prayer, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah B'alma divrach rute v'amlich malchuteg B'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala v'yisman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mavarach Le'olam Olmei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shmei D'Kudashah B'richu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam levracha, may their memories be for blessing, and let us say amen. Please be seated. I'm going to momentarily screen share. First, let me just get this to slideshow. First, you will see right before our closing hymn, I wanted to make sure that everybody got to see Abby Peklo, our educators, Pride Shabbat Challah. And I can also show you how good it was. But our closing hymn, we're in for a very special treat this evening. Our closing hymn, actually hang one more second because I realized that there's one other thing which I need to do in order for everybody to hear. There we go. Now that should work. And let's try this again.
Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'avo Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'avo Yisrael. Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'avo Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu
May God's presence be with you and give you peace. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And I'm going to take us